I actually think one of the reasons there was so much pressure from the US, particularly in February, after that, that now infamous meeting in the White House, one of the big reasons there was so much pressure from both the Russians and the Americans to get Zelensky out of office is because they realized that he is a fairly tough negotiator.
Vladimir Putin has told his troops today that he thinks they can finish off Ukraine's army despite ongoing US brokered peace negotiations. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has told Ukraine to hand over even more of its minerals, oil and gas reserves in a deal that offers Kyiv no security guarantees in return. Now, the deal has been leaked, and according to this leak, it would give the US effective control of all, not just a bit, not just a fraction of all of Ukraine's mineral resources. It would also control much of its energy infrastructure and get all royalties from Ukrainian assets until the so-called war debt is paid. I mean, what do you think of this? I mean, to you, listening to this, does this feel like this is America wanting to help Ukraine, or is this America basically trying to kind of grab all of Ukraine's assets? Really interested to hear your views on this. Well, let's now speak with Tom Mutch, who is a journalist in Kyiv, and he's the author of the upcoming book called The Dogs of Mariupol. Tom, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much for having me. I'm afraid I'm going to struggle to get any bawdy jokes into this topic.
Do not worry. I've been told to leave the bawdy jokes for now. But look, Tom, what's your reaction to this leak?
No one is happy about this here because it reinforces the problems that we've been having in Ukraine with the US ever since Donald Trump came to office, which is that nobody sees them as a reliable broker or a reliable negotiator. They're seen to basically want to extract as much out of Ukraine as they possibly can while giving as little as possible in return, which has also been the Russian approach to the negotiations. So it's also the US seems to fluctuate all over the place. First, it was saying that Ukraine owed them $500 billion. Then slightly more manageable minerals deals seem to be worked out, which now seems to have been yanked out from under them with a much more punitive one. No one has any consistency. No one has any clarity. I mean, actually, most people are just sort of dismissing this as potentially another negotiating ploy, but people are absolutely sick of the Trump administration's totally cack-handed approach to diplomacy that they're showing here.
And also, how are people in Ukraine feeling about the idea of just all of their assets, all of their minerals, all of their kind of resources just being sort of taken and extracted by America?
Yeah, I mean, no one wants a situation like that, simply because they've been fighting for the last 3 years in a full-scale invasion, and it's now 11 years since the initial Russian incursion into Crimea and the Donbass. And the Ukrainians have been fighting all that time for their sovereignty, for their independence, for their ability to control their own future, their own security policy, their own economic and military policy. They don't want the Russians to have control of it, but they don't want the Americans to have control of it either. They've been fighting for this freedom and sovereignty and independence, and they're not going to turn that sovereignty over to the US any more than they would to the Russians.
And I mean, it does feel, doesn't it, that, originally that there was this idea of, look, America will ask for some minerals in return for the help that they had given, and Donald Trump was very angry about what President Biden had given to the Ukrainians. But it now looks like, according to this leaked deal, it's a vast expansion of this. It looks sort of like, America is actually wanting to sort of take over vast sections of Ukrainians' energy infrastructure and all its natural resources.
Yeah, so the original deal was actually supposedly about critical rare earth minerals, and that would have been more of a genuine partnership because Ukraine has a lot of them, but they would have needed US help to extract a lot of them from their soil. This deal covers oil, gas, I believe covers shipping, energy infrastructure. It almost covers the entire country. And what is, I think, very concerning is if you look at how America has been talking about other international problems or its own international concerns, it says, okay, the way to solve everything is just to give it up to the Americans. Problems with trade with Canada, make Canada the 51st state. Problems with security in Greenland, make Greenland part of the US. Problems with the Panama Canal, annex it. Problems in Gaza, make it put it under US administration. And it looks like they're now turning that approach to Ukraine. And again, Ukraine has been fighting for the principle that small nations and small peoples don't have to give up their freedom and security, in the face of aggression from larger nations. And it just seems like the Trump administration is riding completely roughshod all over that.
Well, I mean, I think to many people, Tom, it will look like America and Putin want to come to a deal where essentially they're sort of on the same side, carving up the spoils of Ukraine.
Yes, exactly. And I think one of the things is that at least at the end of last year, or particularly in sort of August, September, October, Ukraine was very much on the back foot militarily. It was taking, pretty serious casualties, and it was losing, fairly large tracts of land in the Donbass. That has mostly stabilized. That situation's mostly stabilized. Yes, they did lose some of the territory they were holding onto in the Kursk region in Russia, but the Russians have really been unable to make any serious advances in eastern or southern Ukraine for quite some time now. So that the Ukrainians really don't feel like they're on the brink and that they need to stop this war now in a way that might have been on the table 6 months ago. They feel like they have a little bit more negotiating leverage and thus much less willingness to bow to American and Russian pressure. And I shouldn't discount, by the way, the Kremlin-coded messaging that a lot of the Trump administration officials are saying. So, for instance, Steve Witkoff's comment about, the referendums that happened supposedly in Kherson and Zaporizhia, these were shams. These were referendums conducted at gunpoint. The fact that he was perpetuating the Kremlin narrative that, these places really want to be part of Russia. Many people in Ukraine found that deeply, deeply offensive. Yeah. I know many people from those regions, including people who had to flee because they lost their homes that are now under occupation. And for them to have to negotiate with people who are making such bad faith claims, who are supposed to be their allies, is a really, really bitter pill to swallow.
I'll just read a couple of messages that have come in from our listeners. Tom, someone said, I cannot believe that Trump is allowed to act like this bully. It's basically he's going in and taking money and sweets wherever he chooses to. It's despicable. Nick says this is Emperor Trump enslaving the citizens of Ukraine. Jim says, I'm American. Trump is, in short, insane. The American circus has elected a clown. Sorry, but true. Simon says the word you were looking for that sums up Trump's deal for Ukraine is extortion. I mean, universal, so many people using that word. I mean, surely this is not something Zelensky can sign up to.
I'd be very surprised if he would sign up to this. Look, I actually think one of the reasons there was so much pressure from the US, particularly in February, after that, that now infamous meeting in the White House, one of the big reasons there was so much pressure from both the Russians and the Americans to get Zelensky out of office is because they realized that he is a fairly tough negotiator. He will actually, stand up for his country's interests. And that's why his domestic popularity in Ukraine has rallied. And so, no, I would be very, very surprised if Zelensky signed up to him. It would be domestic political suicide. And it isn't even any kind of sweetener in the form of security guarantees or the promise of future military aid that would mean it might be palatable for Ukraine. It's literally just a one-sided extortion deal that gives nothing to the other side in return.